You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 28th of May 2024 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS.
Live from Hong Kong, this is The Globalist. I'm Tom Edwards. Coming up today, we're live at the UBS Asian Investment Conference at the Four Seasons on our special programme. Niall MacLeod from UBS will join us at the top of the show to set the agenda here at the AIC and share how the bank is keeping an eye on the past with a view to the future. We'll catch up with a man leading a huge development just along the way here in Hong Kong next to the IFC and get his perspectives on that project, maybe a view on the direction of travel for the retail sector too. We'll be reviewing the day's newspapers with the New York Times China correspondent, and we've Monocle's own crew of editors on the ground with us here in Hong Kong too. That is all ahead today on this very special edition of The Globalist. Alongside me here at Monocle's pop-up radio studio is James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor, usually stationed in Bangkok, but of course an erstwhile Hong Kong resident. James, thanks for joining me on this crazy locomotive ride that is The Globalist as well.
Good afternoon, Tom. It's a real pleasure to be in the same time zone and obviously standing alongside you.
It's true, you're normally just down the end of the line. But let's jump straight into the, I guess why we're here. We're joined now by Niall MacLeod, Head of Product Management at UBS, for some perspectives on AIC. Niall, a man, I guess, responsible for content, agenda design, if not the busiest man in Hong Kong in recent weeks, certainly in the top one, is that fair to say?
Well, I'm really looking forward to getting some sleep in about 48 hours' time. So somebody said to me today, you don't look as if you've had any in the last 48 hours. So yes, that's going to be end of the week, top of the agenda for me. But no, it's fantastic. And welcome to Hong Kong. It's fantastic
thank you
broadcasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit then about the challenge of putting this conference together, because I think one of the things that strikes me as super interesting as an observer looking at it is this blending of obviously big macro themes with some kind of really interesting micro focus areas, and looking at things like, developments in neuroscience or how we're going to drive longevity in people. Tell me about how you fold all these highly complex things in so elegantly, seemingly so elegantly together.
Thank you for calling it elegant. Well, look, I think we took a step back and thought we've got lots of different types of investors that are coming here. We need to try and put something on that is relevant to all of them. And we wanted to showcase the future, look at some of the stuff that's happened in the past. We wanted to be relevant top-down as well as inform on some of the debates that are happening bottom-up. So the starting point was to try and blend all of these four things together. And the past stuff in a way was easier because there's a lot of things going on today that have analogues that have happened in the past. For example, some of the stuff we're talking about is very investment orientated on corporate governance that's going on in Korea, Japan today. Korea and Japan. There are some analogues to what happened in Europe in the 1990s, for example. So that was one part of this. Let's look to the past to try and look to the future. The other stuff we really wanted to be very futuristic about. There's a lot of content in this conference around Gen AI, which is a big issue today. We wanted to go a stage beyond that, and hence the reason we've had these fantastic panels today on the brain and longevity and thinking about how mind control and some of the incredible scientific developments that are taking place might shape things in the next few years.
Well, we might be hearing a little bit about mind control later, all perfectly innocent, obviously. And tell me about where we are. You generously welcomed us to Hong Kong, of course, but it is interesting. I know, obviously, for UBS, there's this deep conviction about the region as a big growth engine for the bank, and it is uniquely, or it feels to me, uniquely well suited to be a place to restate that commitment. It is this. It's a real global city for the region, but it is an extraordinary driver. This is the only place this conference could happen, isn't it?
Well, I like to think so, because I'm a Hong Kong resident too, like James, so very proud of this amazing city. I think one of the best advertising slogans of all time is 20 years ago Hong Kong came up with this slogan of Asia's World City. And the last few years have been a bit challenging with COVID and travel restrictions and all these sorts of things. But actually, when you really step back and think, where could you put something on? There really are only two places, and one is Singapore and the other is Hong Kong. And this is just such an incredibly dynamic location. Both cities are very important to UBS, and we're big in both. One runs North Asia, one runs South Asia, but this is just still such an amazingly dynamic city, a great place to bring people into, especially when they haven't been here for a few years.
Well, this is interesting, and James actually is an erstwhile Hong Kong resident. He's been in Bangkok for the last 18 months. But James, I know I've picked your brain about this already. When you return, you said to me this morning on our earlier broadcast, actually, it feels like coming home. Unpack that for me. You've got an indelible connection with the place, I suppose, right?
Well, it's the familiarity, right? You know the city. We know the city so well. I was here for almost a decade, and so there's just that. It's just nice to not have to look at your phone to find anywhere, and you know all the shortcuts. Here we are in the Four Seasons. I know how to get to the IFC and if it's raining, you don't have to get wet. I know where all the toilets are. I mean, it just has that. It feels like my home turf, and it's nice. You don't feel like a tourist. I feel like I know my way around. And actually, Hong Kong is a very small place. It's very dense. It's very vertical. But when you think about London, or you think about Bangkok, think about New York, Hong Kong is a very small place, and it's amazing the influence it has on the world. One thing I wanted to ask was, we're in the Asian century now. People debate about whether it started or not, or whether it's going to start. But how much is what's going on here and in the region setting the agenda for what's happening, in the West? Because we're used to the trends starting in the US and Europe and coming here. But with things that you're talking about today and tomorrow, how much of that is setting trends going the other way?
That's a fascinating question. So I think if you're an investor, every now and again we like to have this debate that perhaps we can decouple from what's going on in the US. And the reality is, for financial markets always, the US interest rate cycle is going to determine where the markets are going to go. But there's so much incredibly cool stuff happening in Asia in terms of growth and innovation and products that if we can divorce ourselves a little bit from monetary policy and think about some of the big changes that are going on, a lot of it is actually driven from this region. In technology, you look at the number of patents in China, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Japan. They vastly exceed what we're seeing going on with creativity in other parts of the world. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening here. But it's about that. If you think about financial markets in the next 3 months, we can't divorce what's happening elsewhere. But if we think longer term, there's a lot of really interesting things happening on the ground in this region, particularly in science and technology.
Neil, I did want to kind of get you to. I can't get you to choose the things you're most looking forward to as someone who has oversight over everything. But a couple of things. I know you're moderating some specific panels with various kinds of friends and acquaintances of yours. And we talked about this eye on the past, and you, I think, are talking to William Dalrymple, or you have done already. Is that in your top couple of highlights? Pick a couple out.
I think it has to be, yes. So the theme of the conference is an eye on the past, a view to the future. And William is an incredibly well-travelled, well-written broadcaster, historian, travel writer, and his perspective on the journey of learning, I think, is going to be absolutely fantastic later on this afternoon. We also have Professor Paul Romer, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, tomorrow, who I've had the incredible pleasure of interviewing in the past, who is just one of these extraordinary intellectuals who can bring so many ideas and concepts together in very simple terms that makes you really think, wow, why had I never thought about that? And so I'm super excited about hearing from him tomorrow, but throughout the whole 2 days of the content, there's just so much interesting, intellectually exciting stuff. I think there's a lot to choose from.
And tell me, how do you calibrate the success of an event like this? Because the conversation that we keep having is how powerful it is to convene, to gather together, to be exposed, not just to people you know are super smart, you're looking forward to hearing from, but maybe a view out of left field that you never would have thought of before, and that might be the difference maker for the direction of travel for your business or your portfolio, whatever it might be. Just the act of getting together is so important, but that's harder to measure, maybe? What are the metrics of that?
Well, we obviously have internal metrics we look at, which I'm not going to bore you with because they're very financially orientated. But we would measure all sorts of things about how much clients are paying, etc. But I think one of the intangibles is exactly what you just described, Tom, which is clients say there's an amazing opportunity in my very busy life when I'm looking at screens and stock prices moving around and thinking about balance sheets. This is an opportunity to really sit back and think and be curious And that's, I think, something that people really value, and that's why these conferences are normally so packed.
And what about these insights? Longevity, mental well-being. I need some pointers. You can probably see from how tired that I look. Any takeaways, any things that you already think, I can start doing that. I can start to do this and see if it makes a difference.
Well, I think in the longevity stuff, it's we know a lot of it already, which is get a lot of sleep, which I've not been doing very much of in the last few months. So that's something I'm looking forward to, as I said. But eat well, sleep well. On the longevity side, there's just so much evidence that that's really going to matter. On the brain and mind control, and you're going to hear more about that later on in the hour, but that is a lot more science-based, but so much fascinating research going on to solving, frankly, things that we haven't thought about for 30, 40 years. The last big breakthrough was antidepressants in the 1980s. It's extraordinary to think we might be able to resolve issues like paralysis or depression in a much more significant way, or PTSD, or addiction. And that's where the science is leading us.
And the pace of that change, as we'll hear later, is astonishingly fast. How are you bearing up, James, on the longevity-ometer? Getting lots of sleep? You've got 2 young kids, probably not doing great on that by that metric, I imagine.
I mean, your kids are older than mine. Does it get easier?
It gets different, right? The challenge evolves a little bit. Neil, just finally, what do you want this conference to achieve? It's a kind of a real interesting moment, isn't it, for UBS? The 27th edition, of course, but the first of UBS since last year's merger. A different kind of perspective, a different kind of pressure, I guess, in a way. What will you be most happy after you've recharged your batteries and had some sleep, and you're reflecting on it? What will give you the most satisfaction?
I think 2 things, if I can say 2 things. One is, this conference mattered a great deal to our former colleagues from Credit Suisse. They were very, very proud of it. They held the last conference the day after the deal was announced, right? So it was a very emotional day for them. So if they are proud of this conference and taking it into a new era, I feel very gratified about that, because we've welcomed many of them into the organisation, and it would just be great to be able to take that on. So that's one thing. The second thing is, as always, we want our clients to walk out thinking, wow, I learned a lot, I was stimulated, I got tremendous insights, and feeling that it was a really premium experience, which in the 4 seasons it always will be. So if I can achieve those 2 things, I'll be feeling very, very happy about it.
How much do you have to tie it to another event? Because a lot of, for Hong Kong, it's like the Rugby Sevens is a big time in the calendar. And some events are tied to that because they think that's the way to lure people in. But here we are, we're in May. People are coming for this event, because they want to be here. But how important is it to hook it to something else?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, not really all that important at all. Credit Suisse used to hold the conference at the end of March, because they were the sponsor of the Hong Kong Sevens. And 20 years ago when that started, that was a significant thing, because in those days people would come for the client entertainment. That has changed a lot in our industry over the last 15 years, so it's no longer quite so relevant. What matters is what's the content that you can provide, how many corporates can you provide or bring along so that our investors can speak to them. What other content can you provide in the panels that we've been discussing? And actually this time of year is a better time to do that than the end of March, when the conference was traditionally held, which is why we moved it. So I don't think you don't need to hook it to something when the evidence of that is just in the sheer volume of people we have. It's a little bit crush-centric at times. So that's proof in the pudding in a way that you don't need to tie to something.
Does that
Other than Monocle, I think the real attraction has been the Monocle Radio.
Well, I mean, Hong Kong is not the only city, but there's like a nightlife problem here. No one wants to go out. I mean, are these conferences less boozy and less late night than they were in the past as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember, dating myself a little bit, 30 years ago, people would come to these conferences and say, who's the rock band that you're going to have tonight? What sort of parties can I go to? That's the last thing people are interested in. Because it's much more work. What am I going to learn? Stimulate me, but don't stimulate me with alcohol and bands and things. It's, the world has become, the finance world has become a very different beast from what it was 20 years ago.
For better, or?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the idea that you're going to party when you go into a conference is really not a particularly good use of your client's money.
Wise words indeed, and I think it comes back to the power of those compelling narratives, and I think that's what Monocle's about, and that's why we all get along so well now. But listen, terrific to hear from you. Good luck with your panels. I know you're super busy. I do hope you get that R&R. Promise me you're going to do it right.
I'm going to.
Your very longevity is a question. But Neil, lovely to chat with you.
Fantastic. Thank you both very much.
To speak to us. That was Niall MacLeod, Head of Product Management at UBS. They're joining us here on The Globalist. It is 14:15 here in Hong Kong. Henry Steiner is the father of Hong Kong graphic design. Austrian originally, Henry's lived here in Hong Kong for decades. He has a major retrospective coming up at M+ next month, opening on the 15th of June, which charts his influential graphic language with a selection of some of his most iconic projects. His studio is 60 years old this year. James and I chatted to Henry a little earlier. We began by asking whether his creative approach differed depending on the industry he's designing for.
I familiarize myself with the client and try to bring out what I see as their personality. I don't have a style. I don't work that way. I try to bring things out of what the client is doing. I spend a bit of time interviewing them, asking, questions, when did you do that? How do you feel? And the solution usually comes to me. That is, I don't impinge my ideas onto them. I try to bring out their personality. And I think they understand that.
So it's always a collaborative process.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Like a lot of smart people, you make it sound like it's very easy, even though I'm sure it isn't.
Well, I love my work. Groucho Marx had a quiz show towards the end of his career, and he would interview people, before quizzing them. And he was talking to this one young man, and he said, do you have any children? He says, yes, I have 5 daughters. Groucho says, that's a lot of children. And the young man says, I love my wife. And Groucho says, I love my cigar, but once in a while I take it out of my mouth.
Well, I think we're unlocking some of the secrets of your unique approach, Henry, no doubt. Just tell me about, when you look at the world of graphic design, I guess here in Hong Kong, but more broadly, are you still excited by the work you see from younger artists who are working in the same field? Do you see quality? Do you see work that will last 60, 70 years being done at the moment?
I don't know. I try to make a personality for the client and to bring that out and to make it, if you like, unique. I would hope that people would not look at my work and say, oh, that's Steiner. I don't want that. The more varied it is, the happier I am.
You're Austrian, you're
Yeah.
European, but you
Yeah.
came to Hong Kong in the 60s. 60 years later, has this city rubbed off on you? Does it influence your design? Are you a different designer now because of the length of time you spent in Asia?
Well, I was kind of the Johnny Appleseed for design. I brought things to people, and I did it in a way that was just quizzing them, saying, what do you do? What's special about what you do? And I carried on, and I let the client, I wanted to bring out their personality.
Henry, look, it's been amazing to chat to you. It's an incredible journey you've described to us, and how exciting that so many more people are going to be able to engage with your work and practice now because of this.
I really don't expect people to say, oh, that's Henry Steiner. I want them to say that's the tooth polish design, but not that's Steiner again.
For the work always to be functional, really, and purposeful.
And working for the client, not to make me grandiose or anything. That's not my job. In a way, it's like a doctor or a lawyer. You don't go around saying, I did this, I did that. And I love my work.
The great Henry Steiner talking to us a little earlier. James Chambers is still with me. I think he's been exceptionally modest and didn't like us mentioning, but obviously this big retrospective, M+ starting next month, fitting, apposite recognition of a man who's made a really singular impact, not just in graphic design, but to Hong Kong as an adopted Hong Konger, right?
The guy's 90 years old. I mean, his studio's 60 years old, and he's still turning up every day. But what's amazing about Henry is that his designs are still everywhere you see in Hong Kong. If you go to the Jockey Club, I mean, if you go Hong Kong Land, HSBC. But I would definitely encourage people to go to M+, because everyone knows it. It's this amazing contemporary art museum. But also they have this even better archive. They've been collecting designers from all over Asia, and it really is a resource for the region, and there's nothing quite like it. And they have Henry Steiner's work, they've collected his papers, and they're going to show it off in this retrospective. So for young designers, anyone interested in design, it's a fabulous place to go, and it'll be a fabulous exhibition.
And you chatted to Henry, didn't you? 5 years ago
5 years
now,
ago,
wasn't
yeah.
it? Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
And he's still as sharp as a tack as he was in 2019. More about Henry later. You're listening to The Globus. We'll be leafing through some newspapers right after this.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
And now, regular listeners to the programme will know we like to review the day's newspapers, wherever we happen to be. We're here in Hong Kong, so joining us at our pop-up studio is David Pierson, the New York Times China correspondent. Good afternoon, David. How are you?
Good, thank you very much.
James is still with me as well. Where to start? So it's always exciting to sort of dive into the papers. We've got our Monocle newspaper as well to add to the pile. But I know you've been browsing around a few stories that have kind of caught your eye. Where should we start, David? Where do you want to take us first of all?
Well, sorry, I have to be biased, but I have to start with the New York Times.
That's perfectly acceptable.
And give credit to my colleague Jim Tankersley, who's written a very interesting analysis piece about what's at stake for the Biden administration with the export of Chinese vehicles, electric vehicles, which is a big issue in Europe right now as well, and causing a lot of trade tension between China and Europe. And essentially, he lays out the points that Biden has been trying for years to introduce more environmentally friendly policies, including more electric vehicles. And a simple solution would just be allowing Chinese cars come in for $10,000 a pop, rather than the American cars, which go for an average of $53,000 US. But of course, we know things are not that simple. There's politics, there's national security involved, and the piece really just dives into a lot of these issues. For example, America doesn't want China to have another monopoly on on some sort of manufacturing things, such as electric batteries.
Yep.
And then there's also the national security problem. We don't know what the cars, how many, if America is, if China's sending signals back or anything ridiculous like that. But also there's the jobs aspect with the election coming up, which is key for Biden, and he's got to protect the green jobs of the future. And so this was just a great piece.
And to what lengths is Biden going to with this bill? Because you can ban these cars made in China, but a lot of the Chinese manufacturers are then making them in Mexico. I mean, is he targeting the firms themselves, like they did Huawei? Are they trying to destroy Great Wall Motors, or is it geographical? Is it focused on just the made in China?
It's focused on the made in China and in these brands. These are 100% tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, and it would not destroy these brands because right now none of these cars are coming into the U.S. This is hypothetical. And so there's actually some argument that they should ban it outright rather than 100% tariff, because 100% tariff on a $10,000 vehicle is still pretty cheap for American standards. And so this is the big trade tension that is brewing between China and the West right now.
And David, is there any sense of what plays out in terms of US politics in November, big general election obviously, and the impact that may or may not have on making this, even more of a thorny issue? Making it clearer. Is there any sense of anticipation that could at least deliver some greater clarity one way or the other?
Well, China is one of the rare bipartisan issues in the United States. The Republicans and the Democrats can't agree on anything, but they can agree on China being a major threat and a major challenge to America's future. And so Biden can do no wrong, I think, politically, from being hawkish on China. He has to show that he's protecting American labor. And the car industry is a huge, powerful lobby in the United States.
And that holds true even if it hits people in their pocketbooks, because you always come back to this idea that if there's a value proposition, people will compromise even their most deeply held ideological principles. But
sure,
the view is that it's too easy a political lever for him to...
It is, and then America's also complicated by the electoral system. So even though it would hit people's pocketbooks in states that maybe are already in the pocket for Biden, a lot of car manufacturing are in swing states.
How much can he keep doing this? You know, we had Huawei, we have TikTok, now we have the cars. I mean, there was solar panels back in the day. Is it we're just going to go to the next industry, the next industry, the next industry? Is it becoming a bit kind of shameless?
Well, I think there's still a lot of runway, and China has an answer for a lot of its industrial policy as well. I mean, the reason why these Chinese electric cars are so cheap is because there's so much state subsidies going into the manufacture of these cars. And so, it's a two-way street. And I think Biden does have a lot of runway to be hawkish on trade with China.
Let's move on. David, I know you've had your eyes kept across a whole different raft of things. Obviously, the Chinese drills off Taiwan made a lot of press everywhere about a week or so ago. More news on that? Tell us what you've been finding out.
So, out of fairness, I'll pick the Washington Post this time because everyone covered this story. But a group of bipartisan, again, American lawmakers showed up to Taiwan. There's a delightful picture of the new president, Lai Ching-te, wearing a 10-gallon cowboy hat, reminiscent of Deng Xiaoping many years ago when he visited Texas. Don't tell China that. Standing next to Congressman Michael McCall, who is from Texas. And this is to show America is still supportive of Taiwan. Days after China demonstrated that it could blockade the island, we don't even know if there was ever going to be a war. We wouldn't even know because the difference between a drill and a blockade now is being blurred. This is gray zone action, they call it. And so these American lawmakers showed up, and what came away from it was that there's a huge backlog of weapons that America has promised Taiwan, defensive weapons, about $20 billion, years backlogged, and that's being complicated by America's obligations in Ukraine, the Middle East, and it really underscores the limitations of America's global power when there are so many hotspots around the world right now.
How much was there some signaling from the US, from these congressmen, about who they sent? Because obviously the high watermark, or the low watermark, was obviously when Nancy Pelosi went as the speaker, and that did change the status quo. In terms of the latest visit, I mean, could you construe that as an olive branch by the US not sending the new speaker?
I guess somewhat. I think the Americans have learned that the Chinese would view it as highly provocative to send the speaker. But this is the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. This is a person who would have some, actually major influence on whether America would go to war with China or not. He has decision-making power on that. But and China warned already, please don't do this. And they see any sort of official communication between the U.S. government and Taiwan as them undermining China's sovereignty on this issue. So it's provocative, but on the list of things that are provocative, it's not up there as House Speaker. It's a good question.
Not in the top few.
No.
Now it says here, time for some trash talk. And I was like, but David seems like such a scrupulously polite gentleman. What can this possibly be about? But you're going to illuminate us, David, with this.
Yes, Hong Kong right now is transfixed with a rubbish story. A rubbish story that is 20 years in the making. There was a plan for many years to get people to stop just stop collecting so much trash and throwing it away. Just try reduce trash. And Hong Kong is a big, rich metropolitan city. You know, you would think that they would be able to come up with some sort of solution here, but it's been disastrous. It's been disastrous for the local government. There's been so much resistance, and essentially what they were asking people to do was buy government-sanctioned plastic bags of varying sizes and putting their rubbish in it and throwing it away that way. And they'd hoped if, you know, essentially taxing rubbish. And they had some pilot programs. Very, very few people took it up. They even had incentives where, you know, you could accrue points the more you did it. You get free cooking oil, free toilet paper, free instant noodles, and it just crashed and burned. And I've had lawmakers tell me, listen, I'm not worried about the response to national security here in Hong Kong. I'm worried about what people think about the trash scheme. This was really anxiety-inducing for lawmakers there.
Some rubbish policy. James, you're sort of nodding sagely. Does this give you flashbacks to trash management from your years here as a resident?
It's just, I mean, it says a lot about Hong Kong, I think. I mean, if you hit people in the pocket, then they will protest. But it's interesting, in the same year, and obviously not that long after, the government introduced this plastic ban, which will effectively stop all restaurants and hotels giving out plastic toothbrushes and, you know, cutlery. And so that passed, and that is going to come into effect in a few months. And so they got that through, but they couldn't get this one through, which would, I guess, affect everybody in Hong Kong. But for those of us who live in Hong Kong and know Hong Kong, I don't know how they would do it practically, because within a week of these bags coming out, you'd find a lot of grey market ones and black market ones appear from, you know, across the border. And so I'm not sure how they would ever bring it into being. But it is interesting in this post-national security era Hong Kong that there is, you know, with a government that has no opposition, that the people can have a say. I mean, the government is saying it because it was so unpopular that they're not bringing it into being. I wonder what David's opinion on that is, or whether there's something else in play. But, you know, the people still have a voice on some things.
Is it people power, David, or is it just political?
Well, you could argue. I think the glass half full view would be it was a response to public sentiment, and it could be a workshop test of how you view the government here. But some people would argue that had there been a more robust opposition that had been focused on some of these local issues, that maybe it wouldn't have gotten this far to begin with. You know, one of the big problems now is they're sitting on tens of millions of dollars of garbage bags that they don't know what to do with right now.
But this was actually a good thing, though. I mean, the government was trying to do something. And everyone can criticize the current government, the past government, but this was something that actually Hong Kong needs to do. As David said, Hong Kong should be leading the region in things like this. It has the money, it has the infrastructure, and it's not a very small place. It could be the test bed for how other big major cities in Asia do this. And the fact that Hong Kong hasn't been able to achieve it is worrying.
Super interesting. David, look, it's been great to rattle through a few stories. What's on your agenda? Any super exciting assignments? What gets you springing out of bed?
The excitement of Chinese foreign policy, yes. Can't get enough of it. What's coming on down? I mean, I'm still recovering from Putin's visit to Beijing, which was an all-encompassing affair, and the restructuring of the New World Order. So I need some
just
time.
these small details. But it's been great fun chatting to you. We'll have you back on Monocle Radio very soon. David Pierson, thanks for joining us here at our pop-up studio in Hong Kong. It's 14:34. Let's cross over back to London. Let's get the latest headlines from around the world. Waiting for us in the studio, I hope, is Vincent McAvaney.
Thank you, Tom. At least 45 people have been killed and dozens more injured in an Israeli airstrike on a camp for displaced people in Rafah. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the deadly strike was a tragic mistake made despite the military's best efforts to avoid civilian casualties. There's been international condemnation of the incident, with the UN Security Council set to hold an emergency meeting later today. Pyongyang has confirmed North Korea's latest attempt to put a spy satellite into orbit on Monday ended in a mid-air explosion. a long-time priority of Kim Jong-un's regime. 2023 saw 2 failed attempts before the country claimed to have successfully launched a spy satellite in November, after allegedly receiving Russian assistance in exchange for weapons. And China's domestically produced jet, the C919, has completed a year of commercial flights so far on domestic routes with domestic carriers. International certification is the next step, but it could be a long road for the narrow-body jet in a market dominated by Airbus and Boeing. This is The Globalist. Back to you in Hong Kong, Tom.
Thank you very much indeed, Vinny. Are you holding the fort there in London? Everyone behaving themselves?
Absolutely, yeah. We are all here ready to step in at a moment's notice should there be any disruption.
Jolly good. Nice one, Vinny. Well, thanks. We'll check in with you again on our programme tomorrow. You're listening to The Globalist. Tom Edwards here live in Hong Kong with me, James Chambers. Next up, though, we welcome Tom Andrews of Henderson Land. Tom formerly worked for HK Land. He's currently leading a huge development just next to the IFC, just down the road from us here. I'm trying to point in the right direction. I don't know if I'm going in the right direction.
You nailed it, yeah.
Is it Site 3? So maybe it doesn't sound super exciting, but it is a huge, huge deal. Prime harbourfront land. Anyway, it's a pleasure, Tom, to welcome you to talk about that and much else besides.
Thank you very much.
A warm welcome. Nice for you to be here, beaming. Tell us about this project. People need to know about it. It's super exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an extremely exciting opportunity, not just for Hong Kong, but I think for Asia. We've got an amazing site, which you can see just out the window here, right on the harbourfront of central Hong Kong. Central hasn't had a lot of new development for a long time, so it's a very rare opportunity to do something totally unique. We're also in a city of very high-rise buildings. Our project is low-rise. It's got a ton of green space, almost as much outdoor space as it does indoor. So very, very, very unique for Hong Kong. On top of that, it's one of the only sites where you can't build anything in front of it or next to it. So it's one of these legacy sites where whatever we build will have the same views and the same thing for a long time. So a very, very exciting mixed-use development, hopefully redefining what we can do for retail and office and everything in Hong Kong.
You're basically building a horizontal skyscraper, mixed use, shopping malls, entertainment offices, for later in the decade, right? At a time when so much is in flux in terms of all of these things, like retail, the future of the office, shopping malls. I mean, how do you go about doing that in 2024 and trying to anticipate what people will want and need, 5 years from now?
It's an awesome question, James. I mean, when you look at kind of what people want, it's always fun. They want to make memories. They want to enjoy their time out when they're not in the office. And I think we sometimes overcomplicate things. And when you develop a development, no one really knows exactly what people want, what brands want by 2030. But what we do know is they want to hang out with their families, enjoy themselves, spend time, relax, eat food, see something nice, see a great memory. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to create a development whereby you can come enjoy yourself all the way down 24/7, eat something nice, have a great view of Hong Kong, utilize the components of the city, but also create new platforms for new brands, new things to Hong Kong, remove barriers to entry, create really cool opportunities for brands that may be already here that want to showcase their amazing stories in different ways. That's really what you can do. Then the exact brand mix and everything else by 2030 is something that obviously we look at closer to the time.
And that is super interesting, this pivot to experiential is the buzzword, isn't it? Whether you're talking about retail, hospitality, even how people are engaging with their work, it's about building these positive experiences. You speak with such conviction about delivering that, but that is a pivot. It's difficult. The ways you measure the delivery of that are more difficult. Aren't you just making your own life much more difficult?
I am. It's why I have no hair and my beard is rapidly going grey. I think, realistically, obviously you have to balance returns. When you buy land, you've got to pay for it and you've got to build the building. So it's not always going to be the most amazing thing with roller coasters and slides and everything. But there also needs a balance. At the end of the day, real estate developments and particularly retail developments rely on traffic. And if you don't bring traffic into your project, then you're never going to get any return on it. So you do have to think outside the box. You do have to look at, what do people like. Food is the obvious thing. Everyone needs to eat. Obviously, throughout COVID, things have changed. People do have deliveries and things like that. But at the end of the day, when you go out with your family, it's more enjoyable to go out somewhere fun and enjoy yourself. So you can look at the basics of that and then add on it and take out what's, there's not much outdoor space in shopping malls in Hong Kong as an example. So we can use that as a leverage and something unique for us and build on it from there.
Your Site 3 is going to be put down a marker for Hong Kong and for the region. But when you travel around doing your research, doing your own shopping, doing your site visits, who's doing it best right now? Who are you looking to beat, I guess, or to emulate?
It's a great question. Thailand, to me, I used to live there. I think Thailand's been ahead of the global curve in terms of retail developments. They've got a very hot climate, so they need to create amazing spaces for people to go to. Thailand, you can see, traditional malls all the way through to, there's a place called Chiang Choi, which has a plane in the middle of it, which they've turned into restaurants and stuff. I mean, they think really creatively. Obviously, it's a little bit easier when the rental values are a bit lower, but it's an extremely creative place. I love a lot of what Central Group did there. I think Central Chitlom, the new renovation, is beautiful. Icon Siam's beautiful. If you look at China, China's done amazing things. I think particularly since COVID, there are incredible developments. Too many to name, frankly, but obviously SKP have done a great job. Taiku, Li, all the Swire stuff have done amazing things as well. They've got amazing projects coming up. And just recently I was in Japan. Parker Shibuya, I think, has done an amazing job of renovating, creating a really interesting tenant mix, blending the lines between kind of common space and retail shop fronts. And Azabudai Hills, I think it's probably a little bit early, but done an amazing job in terms of creating a new destination. Thomas Hedwick's designs are always beautiful, and a really interesting tenant mix with a lot of great F&B, more F&B than you usually see in development. So again, people to look at how you can drive traffic. So I think we can take lessons from all of that, but then also utilize what's unique about Hong Kong and really amplify that.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about this, the way that you incorporate cultural specificity of place, of people, of retail mix, food experience into these things, because there are things that travel well. You mentioned some benchmarks that tick a lot of the kind of Monocle boxes as well, Tom, obviously. But how complex is that process of integrating all of that sort of cultural, often very fluid dynamics into projects? Because you've got to be careful about being respectful. You don't want to ever end up in some kind of weird parody land. You do it well, but is there a secret, or is it just hard graft?
It's extremely hard graft, and you're totally right. You have to balance it. It has to be authentic, otherwise people are just going to see right through it. Again, Icon Siam has done a great concept in the ground floor called Suk Siam, which has taken the kind of concept of the Thai market and really put it below Louis Vuitton shops. So it shows you how kind of that kind of traditional tenant mix model has slightly changed. We did something here when I was at Hong Kong Land, below ground and base hall, where we tried to kind of bring in traditional street shops into a more retail mall environment. I think it's worked really well. Obviously lessons you can learn, but I think there are ways of doing it, but it's just extremely hard work, having a good team to do it, and a slightly creative team, probably less traditional than you'd normally have in a developer.
Okay. And where do we stand on the luxury conversation in Hong Kong? I mean, the retail landscape is in a bit of flux here. I mean, you're a guy who knows his Gucci's from his Pradas, and you speak to a lot of these guys in Europe. When they look at Hong Kong, there was a time when they were all leaving. Now they all seem to be coming back. I mean, what's going on?
Hong Kong is still probably one of the most important cities on earth for luxury retail. Luxury retail sales in Hong Kong are huge. Second largest watch market in the world. So, we're not, we've had a bit of a downturn, but frankly speaking, it's still extremely important globally. You will see a bit of a change. I think, Hong Kong has been extremely fortunate being on the doorstep of China for the last 20, 25, 30 years. This boom of wealth. So you've seen, Canton Road stores being normally number one globally for an extremely long time. They're now number 3, still means they're extremely important. I think in the future, you'll probably see a bit of a change. Hong Kong now has to slightly reinvent itself from a luxury retail standpoint, attract those customers again. A lot of those brands that previously weren't in China now have great exposure in China. The yen in Tokyo is obviously driving a lot of consumption at the moment in the short term to Japan. So it gives us a bit of an opportunity to, whilst we have this great, strong platform for luxury retail sales, how can we reinvent ourselves? How can we get excitement back into it and let these amazing brands tell their stories in a unique way that probably in Hong Kong they haven't been able to so far?
Tom, you mentioned the E word, excitement. Aside from Site 3, what are you most excited about? You can have train your lens as far ahead as you wish.
Honestly, I'm really excited about Hong Kong. I think I've been here for 30 years. My great-grandparents were here, my grandparents, my parents. It's an amazing, amazing city, and I think we're going to reinvent ourselves. Hong Kong is a city that will always bounce back. We've got the most amazing geography, we've got the most amazing people who work here, and I think, honestly, a lot of people now realize we have to do that. And when you see a sort of sense of realization amongst the key decision makers in Hong Kong, that's a very exciting time to be here. You've got amazing opportunities, you've got beautiful sites, you've got beautiful, amazing customers who can come. I think you'll see a lot of exciting stuff in the near future, retail, office, hotels. And then on top of that, I think look at developments like Airside, look at developments like KLM Musée, who've done a great job in trying to create something different. As and when the market does pick up, I think you're going to see a lot more stuff, as well as really exciting F&B. I had lunch with someone earlier who does amazing F&B, and I think you'll see some pretty exciting stuff coming in the F&B sector in the next 6 months in Hong Kong.
He's excited, ladies and gentlemen, in case you weren't able to gather that. Tom, great fun to chat to you. We could speak all day, but really fun to pick your brain on these topics. Thanks for coming to see us. That was Tom Andrews of Henderson Land joining us here on Monocle Radio. It is 14:45 here in Zurich, 8:45 a.m. if you're listening in Zurich. One area of focus here at the UBS AIC has been mental health and well-being. Next, we're hearing from two super smart people driving genuine innovation in the space. Dr. Amy Cruz is General Partner and Chief Investment Officer at Satori Neuro, and Dr. Jordan Nguyen is founder and CEO of Psykinetic. A little earlier today, they participated in a panel entitled "How Will Scientific Breakthroughs Revolutionise the Way We Think and Act?" Well, just before they took to the stage, we caught up with them at Monocle Radio studio, and I began by talking to Jordan about one of the threads that runs through his work, the transformative power of the mind and mind control. I asked him, are we at a point now where we're better able to harness and harbour that technology?
It's something that's been transforming over time in terms of what we've been able to access, what we've been able to achieve with the likes of the technology. So I started on brain-computer interfaces in 2006, and there wasn't a lot to refer to back then. So I was just testing things out, trying things out. We built our own non-invasive brain-computer interface. So what it meant was some electrodes on the outside of the head. We put a headband around it, and it could pick up on those tiny little electrical signals from the brain, but from the outside of the head. So it really represents what's going on underneath, but isn't completely accurately telling you exactly what's happening. And so that, combined with machine learning, was something I was in for a little bit longer. Started out in machine learning and learning how to build systems that could learn from data, learn from the patterns and differences in data. And so trying to put those together and figure out how to get a mind-controlled wheelchair working back then was a huge challenge. I didn't think it was something I was going to do. I just thought it was something I was going to contribute towards. And then realising at the time that even the technology then was available to allow it to happen. Once we're able to piece together those different pieces of the jigsaw, I had a working mind-controlled wheelchair in 2008 and did full trials with 20 people who could potentially use it in 2011. And so that was back then. It felt pretty good. It felt like we're onto something new and exciting, in that this was a space that was obviously going to boom. And at the same time, AI sort of took a bit of a change and a turn, and it's come a long way, hasn't it? You know, I've been talking about it forever, but then suddenly, of course, now it's really proliferating the public eye. And so what we've seen is this huge change where AI made its way into the public space, but also there's been all these different shifts and changes. Now there's very many different types of AI out there, and harnessing the ones that you need are important. Coming back to machine learning, still amazing at finding patterns and differences in data. So really the tools that we have today, that combined with the advancements in electronics and the accessibility to the types of electronics that might be needed to build out these types of ideas, and to interface things like neural technologies to other things out in the space, like computers, everyday access to products like software, from video editing through to even 3D CAD modeling, being able to build models on the computer with things like the mind or even the eyes for people with high-level physical disabilities. This is where we're starting to see a huge shift because it's becoming a lot more practical now.
Well, I want to ask about that pace of change, because I know, from reading some of your previous remarks, you've talked about just the advances of understanding the brain, neural networks. The pace of change in 3 to 5 years kind of exceeds what we've had in almost a half a century prior to that. Presumably your job, if you like, the day-to-day, is keeping on top of trends. When the pace of change is so rapid, I don't know, thinking about trying to keep abreast of that stresses me out. How do you ensure that you can stay in the vanguard when everything is changing on all these multiple fronts?
You know, it's one of the advantages to being a subject matter expert and being an investor in this space is because I'm the one who gets to dive in and go to the meetings and, you know, talk to individuals and do the diligence and do the landscaping. And so it's like sheer effort. Actually, there's no magic. You know, AI hasn't, you know, magically transformed all of that, you know, for us yet. But you know, you really do have to listen. And I think it's really about engaging with researchers and going to the technical conferences, reading the papers. That is really important, and that allows you, when you start to landscape these areas, that allows you to see where the pace of change is happening or where there's a shift, right? Just as Jordan was talking about, there's been a shift, right? There are these moments where, like, oh, okay, now this is different. Like, we've had this for a while, right? We've had this data for a while, and then now we can compute on it in a different way. And so I think that's been one of the things that's been really important over the last few years. The second is just I call it the systems level understanding of the brain. When I was a young graduate student, you know, neuroscience was very much molecular biology driven, very synaptic, a lot of, you know, wondering about neurochemicals and things like that. And over the last few years in particular, our understanding of cognitive neuroscience, the systems in the brain, how those function, and then how to use technology to shift those networks is really something that I think has really, you know, increased the pace of change. We were talking about reading out signals from the brain. We now have multiple ways to put energy into the brain, right? So using electricity, magnets, low intensity focused ultrasound to start to shift those networks, again, you know, sometimes in the context of mental health, sometimes in the context of brain health and wellness in general. And so I think that shift, the ability to sort of move the networks is really, really something critical, because it allows us a new sort of tool set, right? That, you know, a lot of times we've relied on drugs and therapeutics from that perspective, and the ability to be very specific about the areas of the brain that we want to target is really something that, like, this is happening now and quite fast.
That was Dr. Amy Cruz of Satori Neuro and Dr. Jordan Newen of Psychonetic talking to me a little bit earlier here on The Globalist.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to The Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
Well, just about 5 minutes left in today's programme, and I'm still here with Monocle's Asia editor out of Bangkok, James Chambers, pulling up a mic next to me, resplendent in green seersucker, Monocle's design editor, Nick Monique. Nick, I'll come to you first of all. We chatted a little bit earlier about
the seersucker,
what exactly you're doing here. But you are going to join our editorial director and founder Tyler Boulay tomorrow. Really interesting panel, actually, zeroing in on some of the themes we've been kicking around on the programme. To paraphrase, building better cities in the future?
It really is. So the panel is The Big City Rethink, a global tour of ideas for better urbanism. Now, I mean, obviously at Monocle we've got, you know, as you say, we've got James Chambers standing next to you, our Asia editor, but we've got Outposts North America, all across Europe. So we have these, and then correspondents in I think 30 different countries. So we have people on the ground in cities across the globe, which means I guess we're able to tap into lessons from a host of different places, but we're also able to, I guess, observe themes or trends that might come through. And And the ambition with the panel is to start to talk about some of these challenges that we see, I guess, common and present in cities across the globe, and then also start to look at some solutions for them. So, some of the things we're going to be talking about is, how to instill a sense of pride of place in people, in residents, how to tackle things like my pet peeve, e-scooters that just seem to litter. I've seen you burning around on them in London, but how to also then balance things like driving with, because as much as people might want to push for a pedestrian-only city, and in theory that sounds amazing, the reality is that we need to drive, we need to be able to deliver things, we need to be able to move quickly from one side of the city to the other, tackling things like that through to building for the human scale, and I guess finding leaders that are willing to push boundaries. So they're the sorts of themes that we want to be looking at and finding positive solutions for.
Very exciting. And it's funny, James, talking about benchmarking, it's like Monocle constantly strives to actually demonstrate people who are successful by doing. You must be encouraged. A number of people, when doing the benchmarking exercise, zoom straight to Bangkok. You're at the coalface of a lot of these processes, right, where you are?
Well, I can't take any ownership of those projects, but what we've done at Monocle, what we do, and what we've done in the newspaper that we've produced for this conference is to go around the world and see very different cities. Like for the newspaper, I went down to Manila in the Philippines and spent a day on Smoky Mountain, which is this famous rubbish dump that was basically burning for decades, and people were living essentially on top of it until the government finally closed it down. But I went to speak to a company called San Miguel, which people might know because of the beer, but they're this huge corporation, conglomerate, that basically contributes 5% of the Philippines' GDP. And they have a foundation, and they don't just want to give food away when there's a hurricane or a typhoon, but they also want to make a real difference. And so they're sponsoring these, they call them Better World Community Centres, and I visited the latest one on Smoky Mountain, or in the vicinity, where kids and families are being given an opportunity to improve their lot in life. Because we do look at the Copenhagens and the Londons and the New Yorks a lot, but especially in this part of the world, when you look at Southeast Asia, there are cities that are going through, there are different stages of their development, and they have different priorities and different concerns. And when you go to a place like Manila, you get to see the extreme wealth, but you also get to see the inequality rubbing up against each other. And it's nice that we can profile these companies that are trying to make a difference.
I think
just in a minute, Nick.
I'm always ready to talk, Tom. But I think what's fascinating about that, James, is to jump off the back of that is I think that it's all well and good going to Copenhagen, as you said, where the solutions are already in place. But to be somewhere like Manila, to see a place where they're actively actually making these changes, like that big shifts are happening, I think is much more inspiring, and there's a lot more to be gained from reporting on the ground there. Tom, I'll give you back the hosting duties there. I just wanted to jump straight off the back of that because I was so excited.
Well, no, I was going to challenge you in less than a minute to add another super sharp insight, and you've kind of got halfway there.
Well, the one thing I did want to talk about, because James was also discussing the newspaper which we've produced, but I wrote a short urbanism piece on it, and one of the things we did was talk to the team at W Architects in Singapore, led by Mok Wei Wei, and addressing, I guess, some of these challenges that we're going to discuss tomorrow, Tyler and I, is how do you, I guess, create character with residents? The way that they were doing it, rather than bulldozing all the old, tired architecture, simply revitalising it. So simple, can happen anywhere in the world, but all it is just breathe a little bit of new life into what's already there.
People say I've been doing that with my journalism for many years, Nick. Great to have you with us. Thanks to Nick Manise and James Chambers. That is all we have time for in this special edition of The Globalist, coming to you live from Hong Kong. Thanks to our team back in London, from whom we heard earlier, Vincent McAvenny, Laura Kramer, and our studio manager, Christy O'Grady, and researcher George Ruskin. Thanks to David Stevens, manning the desk here at the Four Seasons. More music on the way in a moment. Do not forget, stay tuned for the briefing coming your way live at midday London time. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with another very special edition live from Hong Kong. Do join us then. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye and thanks for listening.